Hello there. In this video I'm going to show you how you can create this emoji detective pendant as shown on the screen there using Inkscape, which is a vector drawing package, and Fluid Designer for 3D printing. Now you can download Inkscape free from the internet, and I've actually had to load this object onto the screen here because it doesn't work properly within my video capture software. But essentially what you need to do is to go to Object and Symbols so that you get this symbol panel opens up, and you will need to download symbols. Probably the best thing to do is if you actually go on the internet, and if you Google GitHub Inkscape open symbols, and we're going to use the Emoji 1 ones, and you can just download those and install them. So it's Inkscape open symbols, and we're going to use the Emoji ones. So do ensure that you read the licensing, which it's okay, everybody can use these, but if you're using it for commercial reasons, you do need to give attribution to the people here. Okay, so you can download those and install them on your system, and then you just go to Object and Symbols, go to Emoji 1 symbol set, and I'm going to use this detective here, so you just drag and drop that onto the workspace. Then what you need to do is to just save that. So if I go to File and Save, and I'm just going to save it on the desktop, and I just use the default name drawing. So we save that, and this is actually a vector image. Now what you can do, you don't need to use Inkscape anymore other than that. If you now go to Fluid Designer for 3D printing, and this is the application that I use all the time, I'm going to actually create a pendant. So if we just go to the pendants folder, let me just open that panel back up again, and my general workspace, the default size for this, because I create jewellery size objects, this is about 21 millimeters across. That's the default size. So I'm actually going to select a 20 millimeter square pendant and just drag and drop that onto the workspace. So you can see there it is, it's filling up my work area there, and I'm just going to rotate it 180 degrees. I should have switched on screencast keys as well. Rotate it 180 degrees so you can see the ring at the very top there. Now this is actually a parametric smart object, which what that means is that I can change the thickness of this at any point that I want, depending upon which bevel objects you've got listed here. And because it's a parametric smart object, if I actually scale this, so if I press S on the keyboard and type 0.5, if I just open up the toolbox here, you can see the scale vector is 0.5. Now, according to my bevel object, this should be 1 millimeter by 2 millimeters, but the Z thickness is actually 1 at the moment. Now, to correct that, whenever you scale in Fluid Designer, you should always do Control A and apply the scale. And as we do that, these values will go back to 1. And notice that my thickness goes back to 2. The Z thickness is 2 there. So if I scale it again, so if I do S on the keyboard and if I do a scale factor of 2 and then enter, it looks like this object is 4 millimeters thick now because we've got this vector of 2. So you should always do Control A and apply the scale, and notice it now goes back to the thickness of 2. And it does that because this is a NURBS curve. And generally I would advise working with NURBS curves in Fluid Designer for 3D printing. So if I just switch that toolbox out of the way now, and if I go to File and Import, I'm going to import the scalable vector graphic that I've just saved from Inkscape. I'm going to import it from the desktop, and it's drawing SVG. Now we can't see very much there. If I just open up the panel here, now there's a lot of objects on here at the moment, but the Inkscape objects are all called curve. And if I just go to view and zoom to selected and just scroll back, I'm just scrolling the center mouse button there, you can see there is my detective, and it's made up of a lot of different parts, really a lot of different parts. Now what I want to do is I'm holding down the shift key and I'm selecting them all in the outliner panel here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to join them all into one object, and you'll see as I do that I end up with just the name curve here. Now the center of gravity of this object is this circle here at the moment, so what I'm going to do, with it still highlighted, if I go to Tools, Object Tools and set the origin to the geometry of the shape, you'll see that the cursor moves here now. And what I want to do now is to move the whole object back into the center of the screen. So if I go to cursor, snap selection, this is selected at the moment, snap selection to cursor, it will place it in the center of my screen now. So if I just go to view and top, so there's my object in the center of the screen, and you can see when we import from Inkscape, our objects are always very, very small. And if we just click on main information icon, we can see how small this is. So it's actually about 0.2 of a millimeter. So what I want to do is I want to scale this up. And we do that in Fluid Designer because it's based on Blender. We use S on the keyboard to scale. And you could just drag this until you get it to more or less fit inside the pendant there. So we've basically got this up to approximately, I mean, as you can see, it's about 18 millimeters this. Now whenever you're scaling Fluid Designer, always get into the habit of doing Control A and applying that scale, otherwise you're going to have problems later on. Now what we want to do now is we need to add some thickness to this, but also with Inkscape we do have some issues here. I'll just pull that panel back down a little bit. We do have some issues here, and if I go to curve data information, first thing is this is a 2D object at the moment, so what I do is I change this to a 3D object, and you'll see the grey bits disappear, the faces actually disappear of this curve. It is a curve, this object. I mean, if I press the tab key on the keyboard and go into edit mode, you'll see all sorts of weird things happen. And what I need to do now is, with it selected like that, I've just pressed tab to go into edit mode, I need to press the A key on the keyboard to select all the control points. If I zoom in, you can see some of the control points there in orange. So if I A to deselect, A to select all the control points. Now what I need to do is I need to reset these values here. Whenever you import from Inkscape, always set that value to 1, that's the mean weight, and the mean radius to 1. And notice all those blue lines now disappear. We don't need to worry about the tilt. We don't change the tilt. So there's our object now. So if I press the tab key to come out of edit mode, and if I just go to view and top view, and I'm going to view top view, I'm going to switch off the snap at the moment and select the pendant, and I'm just going to pull the pendant down, and what I need is I need it so there's some overlap here and some overlap at the sides, because if I'm going to print this object it's got to be a solid object. So if I highlight our detective there and hold down the shift key and click on the pendant outline now, when I join these objects together, the detective will take on the same thickness of my pendant. Okay, so that's how you can actually create a detective pendant in Fluid Designer for 3D printing by importing a graphic from Inkscape. Now, the important thing to do next is you must export this as an OBJ or as an STL file, and you must always go to Netfab Basic, which again you can download free from the internet, and repair that with Netfab Basic before you can consider trying to slice it or uploading it to Shapeways. But because this object is essentially still a curve, and you can see if I press the tab key and go into edit mode, it's still a curve, what you will find is that really good slicers like Netfab and Cura will solve all the intersecting issues here and turn this into a 3D printable object. Now, there is one thing, well, a couple of things that I would generally do with something like this. I would probably reduce the number of control points there are here, spend some time just tidying it up a little bit, because there's quite a lot of stuff overlapping there. So that's one thing I would do before saving it as an OBJ file. But essentially that's how you can import vector graphics from Inkscape and create 3D printable objects. Now there is a downside to this particular object in that at the moment it's actually a Bezier curve at the moment, and if I try to change the, well, I can change the thickness of this at the moment. If I change it to 3 millimeters thick, you'll see that that worked okay. So I can change it to 1 millimeter thick, 2 millimeters thick, 3 millimeters thick. However, if I try S on the keyboard and scale this up and do Control A and apply the scale, notice that the detective didn't resize properly. The detective's not in fact a parametric smart object like the pendant itself, and that is because the detective, when it's imported from Inkscape, is just a Bezier curve. If you want to change it to a smart object, watch one of the other of our videos on YouTube. Just Google parametric smart objects with Fluid Designer and you'll see how you can change the detective into a smart object. Okay, so yeah, that's basically it for this video. Good luck.